Hey everybody, welcome back to the tavern. Tonight, in addition to sipping on a delicious Modelo Especial on tap, we're going to be doing 3 buy low and 3 sell highs at the running back position. And then over the next couple of days, we'll cover wide receiver, tight end, quarterback, and things like that, so stay tuned. So without further ado, let's get into it. And as much as I love Isaac Arendo, maybe a little bit of clickbait. Love him. Draft him when you can. But we're going to do a separate video on some rookie love. So, starting off, first RB that I think is a nice buy low number 1, Rhamondre Stevenson. So, the idea with Rhamondre Stevenson is not that I objectively love him for Dynasty Fantasy Football. I'm a big fan of, I tend to go RB fragile builds. I don't invest a ton of capital into the RB position in Dynasty startups. I would much rather invest into other positions, particularly at wide receiver, with the general idea being you don't want to draft sort of a middle-aged, solid-producing running back before you know that your roster is in a position to contend. Otherwise, there's a good chance they are going to get devalued as an asset before you have a chance to really capitalize on them. So running backs are definitely, they're a player type that I like to buy mid-season or at the end of a season for a playoff push once you already know we're going for a playoff or a win-now push. And so the idea with Rhamondre Stevenson is he's not a young guy anymore, but he's certainly not old. At just a little over 26, he's a young 26. He completely faded the NFL draft from a reasonable standpoint in New England. They addressed wide receiver heavily. Obviously, they took their quarterback. But they definitely could have made a lot of picks that would have seriously crippled him in his upside at the running back position. But for the most part, faded a lot of bad stuff. And honestly, it not just faded, but also helped him, given that I know Drake May he's going to be, coming up later, he's going to be a buy low at the quarterback position, but he's suffering from New England's bad, they've been bad, it's this, they're just going to be what they've recently been, but they added 2, in my opinion, in the draft process, great wide receivers, a great young quarterback, and their division has only gotten better. So, you have this situation where, as a Rhamondre owner in Dynasty, after I bought him for a pretty decent price, most Rhamondre owners were feeling really good, followed by a period of feeling really, really bad about their asset, whose offense is down the drain, who doesn't have a quarterback, who literally is one of the worst offenses in the NFL, and he might get competition before he does anything meaningful again. Most of the owners are looking to get off the ship, for the most part, and flip him into something they can feel better about before it gets worse, before he goes from some value to next to no value. And I don't think that's his objective value case. He's just carrying too much of the previous stink of kind of a bad and injury-riddled last season, plus one of the worst offenses in the NFL. You lump it all together, and he can really only go up. But again, I mentioned their division is getting pretty good on offense. The Jets profile have a pretty good offense. The Dolphins have a fantastic offense. There's a good chance they're going to be trailing in the fourth quarter a reasonable amount, and he's still a reliable pass catcher who has a safe floor with a pretty high projectable touch total, and then he's also probably the best weapon they're going to have when it comes to the checkdowns in the fourth quarter. So it's a nice combination of high projected touches, giving you a safe floor, a little bit of upside for also being the goal line back, plus the pass catching guy. I mean, he might lose some third down work here or there, but I don't think he's losing, fourth quarter comeback drives and not every 2-minute drill. So safe floor with some upside, and I think you can get him at a very, very reasonable price. I don't think you can just go throw a third out there for him. I think if your team is seriously in win now and you can go trade a second that's projecting to be a very late second for him, maybe get a tiny piece back, I think that's viable. I think just straight up for a late second already isn't a bad trade, but you could maybe even do a little bit better if you can throw in kind of a meh, but kind of upside piece plus a third on your win now team that's not going to use that piece as much as someone else to go get him, I think that's a pretty big win. But even just targeting a late second, maybe getting something cheap back, just allow, especially if the Ramondre team is not in a win now situation where if they're a decent dynasty player and they know they need to get rid of Ramondre, they're not winning now, he's going to be a depreciating asset, you might be able to get him for a very reasonable price, and he's going to do a lot for you. To be fair, he's going off the board. Keep Trade Cut has him as running back 25. The range of players he's going around is 2 up, 2 down is Tyjae Spears, Blake Corum, and then the other side, Najee Harris, Jaylen Warren. I think that Najee Harris, Jaylen Warren, the guys going around him in Keep Trade Cut value, I like. I just don't, in terms of the pricing standpoint, I think the production you get this year in terms of floor and upside is better than all of those guys across the board. You got some younger talent, but in terms of if you just want a 1-year window, we're also, when he plays well this year, I think he's actually going to appreciate in value a little bit, and the New England offense looks a lot better. You could even buy him and then sell him next year for a little bit of a profit after capitalizing on a decent season. So I think he's a pretty good buy now. Moving on to player number 2. We're going to go Devin Singletary is a really nice buy low candidate. The reason that I like Devin Singletary as a buy low candidate is I think the Giants kind of suffer from the same thing that New England did, which is they didn't have a great offense. People are down on Daniel Jones. No one ever really thought, at least for a while, that Devin Singletary is this world beater of a player, and I don't think that as well, but I do think he just did everything that the Texans asked of him. He played well. He outplayed what we thought was a pretty good running back that people invested in, and he's known to be a pretty good locker room guy. The Buffalo Bills teammates talked very highly of him. They liked him quite a bit. I know he's kind of bouncing around team to team, but that's not uncommon for kind of a middling running back. But when you look at where the Giants are at, who they added in the draft, we like Tyrone Tracy, but realistically, he's a high upside project that I think has more of a upside on a play-to-play basis than an actual someone who's going to come in there and take a lot of touches. So I think Devin Singletary is walking into a pretty clear-cut RB1 role, similar to Ramondre. He has a pretty decent projectable touch metric. He can hit some home runs. He's a decent back, and he's also a pretty good pass catcher on a team that I think is going to be losing quite a few games, and I think he's going to have some fourth quarter dump-off sort of garbage time potential. Not a great goal line back, right? So this is not one of those amazing buys, but the price you can get, he kind of falls into this category of just dirt cheap RB1s, and those are the types of players I like to invest in, where you're kind of buying them already at their floor, and it's not so much that Devin Singletary is going to appreciate in value, but at the running back position, you're not looking to appreciate. You're just looking for running backs that you're not going to buy them for a particular price and just straight up lose a lot of value at the end of the year. I had to buy a couple shares of Alexander Mattison last season just to have someone to start because I had so many RB fragile teams. And he's near dust right now, where I don't think Devin Singletary, 1, turns to dust, and 2, for the price you pay, you really are getting, low-end, not RB1 fantasy, but you're getting an RB1 in the NFL. And I like what you're going to get from him from a safe production side of things. And we'll see what happens in that offense. Moving on to player number 3, we've got queued up here. This is kind of player 3, number 4, but I'm going to lump them in because you'll see it kind of makes sense here, and that's going to be Jonathan Brooks and Trey Benson. I got Jonathan Brooks kind of pulled up here on the screen, mostly because I think we're really talking about specifically Jonathan Brooks here. But him and Trey Benson, I think, are worth kind of lumping together as sort of an archetypal either-or. Since this is a buy low, when we're looking at buy lows, we're looking at multiple shots. And the situation with Brooks and Benson is this. Here's why I have them on this list for me, because they're not super cheap. I think there is like an 80% plus chance, if not more, I might be low, that they very easily increase in value. Like, I just don't see very many worlds where they are just a flat value or get worse. Just it's such a it's just it's taking a bunch of money and popping it into an index fund that's going to net you 10% pretty regularly. That is what I think you get, and I think the upside is significantly greater with them. If you're buying them for if you draft him for a late first, I actually regretted not taking enough Jonathan Brooks and then even trading into Trey Benson, because I think what you're going to be able to trade them away for, if you choose to do so, I don't think you're going to want to, but if you choose to do so, they are going to be almost kind of a guaranteed first plus a second as a minimum for what you're going to get them in return. I mean, this is like drafting Rachaad White, James Cook, knowing they're going to be who they are, where you can immediately get very solid return, if not better, because I think from a prospect profile standpoint, they're actually a little bit better. The landing spots are a contributing factor. They're good. They're not home run slam dunk. If either of them goes to the Cowboys, they're just too expensive. They're not a buy low anymore. But because the Panthers kind of have a pretty meh offense, questions around everything about the offense, including him coming off of an injury, including that Chuba didn't look horrible, and it doesn't look like he's going to be a bell cow right away in year one. And then you go over to Benson, that offense looks like it's going to be explosive, but who doesn't love James Conner? I mean, James Conner is like just a redraft best friend, right? You get him late, and he's just great for production. He just constantly does what's asked of him. Because of those question marks and the what are you going to get from him year one, I don't think anyone who drafted them wants to trade them. Let's be clear. If people that drafted them were hoping they fell, they did. They took them. There was great options around them, and they got drafted. But based on what I think you're going to clearly profit from them, if you can find, if you drafted one spot before them, I took Worthy in a lot of spots, and I have been second-guessing it in many, many leagues, especially I'm in a couple of half PPR dynasty leagues. I don't know what I was thinking, taking Worthy over Jonathan Brooks, in my opinion, because of the clear, safe return I'm going to get in production from extremely young Jonathan Brooks and Trey Benson. And so if you can find a situation where maybe you can take one of those earlier picks that's in post-draft and maybe flip them for Brooks or Benson, plus, and get a little profit on the end of it. Work a 2-for-2 where you end up profiting, but you end up with one of them, I think is fantastic. If you can find a way early in the season, pay attention, they're not going to start super hot. If you can find the right team in the right situation to pay pretty face value for them, I think that's a slam dunk. I think they're going to be valued quite a bit better. I think the tough part with them as a buy low is maybe they're not a buy low because you can't buy them for low. But if you can buy them at face value, or maybe just by spending a little bit extra, I think it's going to pay off. I think it's almost a guarantee to pay off from a 10-15% profit in terms of draft capital, where Keep Trade Cut's going to have them with, I would say, considerably decent upside, depending on how those offenses get and what their workload is looking like by the end of the year. So moving on over. Sorry, we don't have it queued up, so we're just going to pop it in the chat. Let's move on to our sell highs. And the first one that we're going to get into is Mr. Josh Jacobs. I love Josh Jacobs in redraft this year. I really do. From a dynasty fantasy football perspective, I see this as a cash in while you can, where I think the value is close to as good as it's going to get. And I see many more cases where Josh Jacobs going into next year is just in most cases worth less than he is right now. Now, if he helps you win a championship this year, that's great. If you are not in the market to be an immediate win now team, or for some crazy reason you're just super rock solid at running back and you have other holes that need to be addressed that are going to be fine, this is one of the first pieces I'm looking to flip immediately, right? Just this is a sell at the high point, sell while you can. I do think he's going to be great for fantasy this year. I think the Green Bay offense is going to be particularly fantastic. I think Jacobs' situation is What if he's good, not great, right? And what if the rookie they just drafted is at least pretty good? He doesn't have to be crazy good. He just has to be good on an offense that I think is going to, they're projecting to make a deep playoff run, if not a Super Bowl run. They looked great in the playoffs. I think they're not just going to want to burn out Jacobs early on and run into injuries and things like that. I think they're going to want to be as balanced as they can, as they maybe can afford to be. Right? It's not like they're just going to go for like a strip 60-40 snap share. I think Josh is going to get all the work, plus passing down work. But I do think if you see that rookie looking good, from a dynasty perspective, when the rookie looks good, you assume the rookie is going to keep eating more and more and more into the workload as the season goes on. And then towards the second half of the season, when you're starting to look at next year for a lot of teams, if it's just not coming together, you're going to project Jacobs as a loser year to year, and you're going to project the rookie as the winner. Now, if Jacobs doesn't get picked up going into next year, where does he land? With all of the recent free agent, chaos at the running back position this year, I think going into next year, Jacobs has a more likely than not situation to be in a murkier situation than you want for him. He lands in a pretty good situation this year. If they extend him, fantastic. I don't see how they extend him forever, knowing they're going to have to pay a lot of wide receivers pretty soon. So maybe, I haven't looked at this situation where maybe it makes sense to extend him for one more year, maybe a franchise tag or something next year as a let's keep a really great running back. We don't have to pay our wide receivers just yet, and that could make sense. I'd have to look into that more. The point I'm trying to make is, if he doesn't stay, there are more chances that he ends up in a murky, weird situation than ones where he ends up in a good situation. If Dallas pays up for him somehow next year, great. But I think this was the year to do it. They didn't. They probably could have. They didn't. I think the ship has sailed for the great landing spots. And and I think the next year's running back, there's going to be some good running backs in next year's class. And I think for the real running back hungry teams, they're going to much rather draft than buy Jacobs. So I think the smash landing spots are going to be taken with youth, not Jacobs necessarily. So sell when he's at a peak if you're in a position where that looks like something you're already in the market to do. Going on to sell candidate number 2. This might surprise some people. I think this is going to surprise quite a few people. That is going to be Isaiah Pacheco. And so I think, the thing that everyone says is, how is he a sell high candidate for you? Like, he's going to be great this year. He got no competition in the draft. He's on the Kansas City Chiefs. There's really no red flags to his game. Why would you want to sell high on him? Well, I think for all the things you mentioned, Pacheco for me is great in redraft. But tell me a scenario where Isaiah Pacheco's situation in Dynasty Fantasy Football, tell me a situation, or multiple situations, if you somehow can name one, where things get better for him after this upcoming year. When I look at Pacheco, just from if you play Dynasty the way I do, which is a little more of a day trader philosophy, I just want to continue to make good plays. I jump in Dynasty leagues to be there for a very, very, very long time. And I play with people that I assume that no matter what, we might lose one person a year, but we will. No one's got a terrible team. We'll even it out if we need to with some compensatory, picks or whatever. We'll figure it out. But the league's not going to fold that I'm in. So if you're going to be playing for a long time, I just try to be a little more of a day trader and make savvy draft choices, play with good sound strategy, and make good market moves with just reasonable buy lows and sell highs over time to accumulate assets to really build some longevity and just a solid team. Or you can find these windows where you're already very good and you can get to great by adding a piece, right? Or if it's not coming together, you're still very well set up going into next year and you can do a real micro end of season sort of mini rebuild so you can conquer next year. For me, Isaiah Pacheco is a player that from like the day trader mentality, he's getting all the touches. They brought in nobody. He's going to get a massive snap share on the Super Bowl winning Chiefs where everyone loves him. He showed up and showed out quite often, did everything asked of him. he's going to get reasonable competition next year, almost assuredly. I mean, they're going to need a depth piece regardless, right? So they have to bring in somebody almost assuredly. I don't see a way in that what doesn't happen. So it's the question between just how good is that piece they bring in, right? So it's between, do they bring in a nobody that can just spell him a little bit, or do they bring in someone that is serious competition? Maybe not for the RB1 role, but serious competition to turn it into a full-blown committee halfway into that particular season. I think that is more likely. I think the Chiefs already play a style of offense where they want to spread the ball around when they can a lot. They want their big playmaker in Mahomes. He's the only one that's getting all the touches. Everyone else, it's spread out. Andy Reid is a genius play designer, playmaker, the way he runs his offense in order to be non-predictable. And honestly, just to keep his creative juices flowing, he's a guy that won't be happy just by having a crazy bell cow. He's going to want to get lots of players involved in creative ways. The things they'll probably do with was it Reese Zammit? I don't know their additional roster slot they got, the rugby player. If there's an over-under in the number of touchdowns he scores this year, I hope it's at like 0.5 because he's going to get in the end zone. Andy Reid will find a way, right? So what I'm saying is he gets competition next year. It could be stiff competition. Guys, also remember, Pacheco, the way he runs is so... You guys remember Thomas Rawls for the Seattle Seahawks? He runs downhill and just so aggressively, so angry, in such a fearless, just crazy, crazy way. I would bet more often than not, if you were to tell me Isaiah Pacheco plays 17 games this year, I'm betting against it. If you say he plays 15 games this year, I'm taking the under on that too. I don't think he's injury prone, but I think the style of football he plays at an often injured position, I think that's going to eat up. And it's not going to take him missing too many more games. I'm not saying he's missed a lot of games, but he's been banged up a little bit by just playing hard and getting hit. And there's no way that the Chiefs don't look at it and say, look, when he's banged up, what do we got? So his situation is just going to get worse next year. Is it going to get terrible? No. But tell me, do you think he's next year's Kyren Williams? He goes from a ridiculous usage, bell cow situation in a great offense to, they took a pretty good running back that we're high on in the draft process. What's his value going to do in Dynasty? It's not going to tank, right? But it's not getting any better. I think there's a very good chance that in terms of Dynasty startup ADP, this is the highest he's ever going to be. And maintaining is his best result. It's probably going to go down, could go down by a round or two. So that's why I think he's a sell high. With everything in his favor, there's a lot of players that, maybe the Mahomes owner who's super into the Chiefs, right? I don't know, maybe that type of guy, someone who already has Chiefs players. There are some people that just think landing spot is just a huge deal, and I'm going to draft everyone on the Bills and the Chiefs, and honestly, that's not a bad way to play fantasy football. It's really not. And so you could potentially get someone to, I don't want to say overpay, because when you're going to go get an amazing piece that's going to put up a ton of points guaranteed for you and maybe win you a championship, is it overpaying? It's locking down a great asset. But in terms of what his value is in relation to like a dynasty startup and overall value and year-to-year value, do I think you can profit right now from him? Yeah, I think you can. I think you can go get a lot for him right now, and I think that's only going to get lower. So, don't trade him for anything. Get the haul. Get more than you deserve for him, and I think it's possible, and I think you should try it. Moving on to the last, we're kind of ending with another 2-pack of players here that are very, very similar. But I think you'll see where we're going here. And this is kind of the 2-pack. Take your pick. They're both in contention. Jalen Wright and Marshawn Lloyd. And if you see a theme here with the sell highs, these are not players I want to get off the train on. These are not players that I dislike, that I don't think have upside, that I don't think are going to have great or at least good roles to overall fantasy football finishes. But I do think from a read the market, look at the range of outcomes, try to make some educated trades, I think that one, I say we know. I am not a crazy college football fan. I am not a crazy NFL analyst. I'm not an NFL scout. So, I don't know what I'm talking about here, right? But I know that a lot of people that know a lot more than I do say that this running back class is one of the worst we've seen in a long time. From a depth perspective and from a top-end talent perspective. Right? I don't necessarily know what that means for like the next couple of guys, which these are the next couple of guys. If you were to compare these guys against like previous draft classes, I'm not sure where they would stack up. But I do know that, if you just didn't have a chance to grab, Benson Brooks, but you need a running back, I think these guys are going pretty high. And what I'm seeing is people reaching for them and people wanting to trade for them when they couldn't draft them and just spending up. I'm seeing people give like, at a minimum, like a second next year and 2/3. I've seen these guys go for 2 seconds, like 25 seconds, or a small piece a second and a third. Types of like we just drafted them. People are already willing to, pay a little bit of a premium immediately for them. So there's already kind of a rush towards them. The range of outcomes, right? I clearly see the ceiling case. Okay, Josh Jacobs doesn't get picked back up. Marshawn Lloyd shows out in year 1, gets the starting job going into next year. Pretty crazy case for a guy you took in the middle of the second round, right? That would be pretty fantastic, right? It's not guaranteed that he's going to be great. Josh Jacobs could absolutely put him in the floor like Zamir White, and maybe the Packers realize, Jacobs is just a lot better than him. Maybe he's just a decent NFL player, but not good. That's the real worry, right? Is what if they're just okay? Because just okay in a great situation is good, but that just okay gets replaced pretty quickly, right? Jalen Wright. What if he does put on that extra weight, not becomes a full bell cow, but becomes Achane dominates all the valuable touches, right? Gets schemed in there to spell him here and there, but it's just never enough to be great, and he falls into that Roschon Johnson sort of, we like the talent, the opportunity, man, I don't know how he's going to get on the field, hoping, and it just kind of doesn't happen, right? I don't think Mostert's going to stay healthy, and I think he's done after this year. Everyone does, but I mean, for this year, what if Wright just can't get on the field? That's a real case. So you're really buying, mid-round 2 draft capital guy who goes around great other players for people that might not get on the field as much as anyone thinks and will take a little bit of a value hit. I think the case for these guys, you're drafting them or buying them to go after the mammoth home run. You're drafting Jalen Wright for the injury, their RB1, or at a minimum 50+% snap share with Mostert and full on do the thing. You're hoping for Jacobs is gone, Marshawn Lloyd, Green Bay Packers, RB1 next year. If those super high upside outcomes don't happen, just take that out of the realm of outcomes. The next couple's outcomes, more often it's not great than it's really great. So what am I trying to say here? What I'm trying to say is, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, they're guys that I like to take in the second round, not because I want them. I want to take them in the second round because I think the market for them is really steamed up, and I see the market for them definitely going. By week 4 or 5, the market for them, I think, almost assuredly dips more often than it pops up. So I think if I can draft them just to trade them for other pieces that I like, if I'm a win now team, I would draft them to flip them for, if I could get like an older running back that will give me guaranteed work, but because they're older and I'm trading the young hotness, I can also get a piece back to recoup a little bit of my second round investment going into future years. Slam dunk. I love David Montgomery. I think he's super serviceable on a great team. If you can trade either of these guys for David Montgomery plus a third, fantastic. I might even do him straight up for Montgomery. It's probably a fair trade, but I'm saying I think you can get a little bit more. If I could go get Devin Singletary and a second to somebody who just doesn't love the Singletary, what he's going to be okay this year, and then what happens, and you still get your second next year, fantastic. If I can go get a Chase Brown plus a second to somebody who just doesn't believe in Chase Brown, awesome. I mean, I'm kind of giving you like great trades, right? I'm not giving you like unfair, ridiculous robberies, but I'm giving you like one team I think almost clearly wins, and I think the person giving those assets knows, hey, I'm giving up more than I think they're like objectively worth, but man, I want the home run. Particularly, I think take either of them, sell Jalen Wright to the Devin Achane owner. That guy now, oh my goodness, he could get injured. The nervousness that is like, oh, I love the upside Achane could be, ooh man, top 3, top 5 running back. But there's a pit, in their stomach there. You give him Jalen Wright, all of a sudden they lock up what should be a really valuable backfield in totality and averse to injury. Maybe they will overpay for that certainty, right? There's many cases where I would do that too. I wouldn't crazy overpay. I might slightly overpay just to lock it in. The Josh Jacobs owner, right? If you can sell Marshawn Lloyd to the Josh Jacobs owner, I think you're saying, hey, if Jacobs goes, you win this trade. If Jacobs is awesome and stays, well, you hedged against, and you're great for that too. And honestly, I think Jacobs one is a particularly fantastic case because they really do kind of win in almost any scenario. And you're very right to profit off of seeking the right person out for the right value. And I think you can go get yourself a really nice profitable deal. Take him in the mid to late second, and then immediately profit by getting much more than a second back in that case. God forbid, if you really want to do a crazy deal, you could package the have Josh Jacobs, draft Marshawn Lloyd, sell the package of Jacobs and Marshawn Lloyd for a really nice haul to a right team. Wouldn't that be fun? But particularly if you don't have the Josh Jacobs, you can sell him to that owner. I think you can do really nice. I've seen some trades in my leagues where that is exactly how that went down, like a day after the draft, maybe later on that night, and they profited nice. I think I saw Lloyd go for 2 seconds to a win now team, right? So it was like a 25 and a 26 seconds, so devalued because they're in the future and projected to be late. But, I mean, just a clear win to a team that is young now, and they probably are not going to win this year, but they have a juggernaut into the future. They're kind of playing for 25 plus. Great trade. So, anyways, just to recap, 3 buy lows: Ramondre Stevenson, Devin Singletary. Love buying low on Jonathan Brooks, Trey Benson, even though they're on the pricier end of things. Sell high if you can cash in on Josh Jacobs or Isaiah Pacheco. I love them at their ceilings. And then selling Jalen Wright and Marshawn Lloyd for an immediate profit with a risky range of outcomes while they are hot in the market. Anyways, I'm Kendall. Thanks for stopping by the tavern. I'm going to go drink another Modelo, and I'll see you guys next time. Check in later on in the week for a couple more, probably 3 more buy low, sell highs across all the other positions, and then we'll do a little bit of, not so much buy low, sell high, but we might do a players I'm rising on and falling on, completely outside of just the market watch trading aspect, but just from let's talk about football players in the NFL that we think are going to have better or worse outcomes based on some recent stuff, and we'll see what you guys think. If you guys are watching, please drop me a comment. Tell me if you agree. Maybe you pulled off a trade for, or maybe you sold one of these guys. I'd love to see some examples. That would be really fun to share in the chat. If you disagree, I'd love to kind of hear your alternative take. Maybe we can get into a little bit of a conversation. And I am brand new to YouTube. I have no idea what I'm doing. As you can see, the production quality is pretty terrible, but we're growing, we're learning, we're doing some things, and I would really greatly appreciate it. It helps me out so much to continue to try and do this and spend more than a couple minutes a week, which is really all I can afford right now, putting these videos up. If you could drop me a sub and maybe like or throw just a real quick comment. If you don't have time to comment, I don't on a lot of videos, but dropping a real quick sub and just clicking that like button. I didn't nearly as much until I started doing the YouTube videos, and now I know what it means to everyone when you do that, and I can tell you from the bottom of my heart, it's a really big deal. It is a huge deal when you have like 20 subscribers and you just go to 21 or 22. It is the greatest feeling, and because I get very few comments. If you do, you're definitely going to get some responses. So thanks again. Thanks for hanging out. We'll catch you on the next one.